Whenever you create a new deployment, you get a new ID. So if you have any downstream applications, that is any application where you have linked the random forest deployment, and now you replace with a new deployment with XGBoost, it creates a new ID, which means all your application fails, and that becomes a huge pain point for our clients.
Welcome to the new AI demo of the day. Today we have with us again Rakshit, Senior Data Scientist of the Data Science and AI Elite team. And today we will see another very cool demo, which is how you can, once you put a model into production, which is what we saw in the last episode, how you can actually replace that model into production with a better model that you developed. So Rakshit, how are you doing today?
Yeah, man, I'm doing good and happy to be here.
Cool. So show us how you can replace and make copies of your models in a production environment.
Sure. So if you'll remember from the previous video, we took a model, which is a random forest model for credit risk, and we deployed it. Now, typically what tends to happen is once you do deploy a model, things don't end. You tend to continuously innovate and try to come up with better models. And that's exactly what I did, where I went into my development project, tried a few different things, and came up with this XGBoost model, which is actually performing better than the existing deployed random forest model. Now, ideally, what I want to do is just replace my random forest model in deployment with the XGBoost one. However, the pain point of this is, if you remember in the previous video, each deployment gets its own sort of unique ID, which is the REST API ID. So whenever you create a new deployment, you get a new ID. So if you have any downstream applications, that is any application where you have linked the random forest deployment, and now you replace with a new deployment with XGBoost, it creates a new ID, which means all your application fails, and that becomes a huge pain point for our clients. So a workaround solution is to replace the existing deployment with your better performing model without having to, replace any of the IDs. And the way we do that is, first, we need to promote the model that we do think we want to replace with, which is the XGBoost one. So just like the previous video, I'm going to click on the model and I'm going to promote it to the deployment space. Since I've already created the space, I don't need to create a new space. I'm going to select my credit risk space and promote it. And if I go back to my space, the new asset, which is the XGBoost model, should appear. So let me refresh my screen. And yeah, I can see my new model in the asset section. So now I'll show you how easy it is to replace an asset. All I need to do is go to my existing deployment, which is the random forest, click on the three dots and click on replace asset. And I do need to then replace with the model that I think is now performing better than random forest, which is the XGBoost one. One caveat, though, that you need to ensure when you try to replace is that the type of the model, the specification should be the same. If it's not, then it's going to fail. But as long as it's same, you can easily be able to replace your model with your better performing models. And once I click replace, what's really happening in the backend is the WML system is shutting down the nodes of the random forest and replacing it with the node for XGBoost without changing any of the endpoint UI. See, easily as in less than 15 seconds, I replaced it. Now, if I click on the deployment and I go back to the URL, you'd still see the same URL as before. So that's how easily I was able to replace my previous deployment with the better performing version of the model in the deployment space.
That is very cool. And like this, you don't break any application and you keep the same endpoint.
Absolutely.
And data scientists can continue to innovate and improve the models. So what happens if you have, you're in an environment where you need a lot of consumption of that model? How can you go around that?
That's a really good question, Arman. So you can actually notice it says copies as 1. And I can even give an example. So let's say, each online deployment gets a response time, which is how much time it takes when you make the request and how much time it takes by the time you actually get the response. So let's say as an example, an average response time that you're expecting your model for, say, is 20 milliseconds, which means any deployment at max can handle 50 requests per second. What would you do, let's say, if you're getting 100 or even 200 requests per second, which means that the rest of those 150 would be just waiting in the pipeline, and which means that your consumers, customers, whoever is consuming your model will not be getting the response time of 20 milliseconds that you're looking for. So the way to handle that is, you can probably guess it, is to make multiple copies. So one thing you can do is either you just deploy the same model multiple times, say 5 or 10 times. However, the issue is that each of them gets its own unique IDs, and it's a pain to handle all of that. And if you want to scale up or down, again, it's really hard. With WML, all you need to do is go to the copy section, click on edit, and say how many copies you want. So let's say you want 200 requests per second with 20 milliseconds, and I'll just make it 5 just to have a buffer, and I click save. And again, in a matter of few seconds, it's going to create copies of the nodes in the backend without having to change the URL. What it means is that now all these 5 copies can be accessed using the same endpoint, and WML is pretty much going to take care of it for you. So if you get 200 requests per second, all of that will be handled without affecting your response time. The other advantage is that, let's say in future you get more requests. So let's say it's 300 requests, or maybe for some reason the requests go down and it's just 100 requests per second. You can easily come back here and scale up or scale down in a manner of, few seconds. And just like that, now you have 5 copies of this model using the same endpoint.
That's also very cool. So then you can use monitoring tools to just track the response time to see if that fits your business needs.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. I hope for all of you, you have no excuses to put models into production now. All these things are a big deal. They're hard to do. And WML in Cloud Pak for Data is doing all this out of the box for you. Just a few clicks, you can deploy models, replace models, and make copies of your models to serve like any business needs. Thank you so much, Rakshit, and see you in the next episode.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.